Hey superheroes, this is Alexander Bear, and I'd like to welcome you to the Modern Day Superhero Show.
What is your mission? What's your purpose here? Why do I get out of bed every day?
What I really wanted to do was to change the face of medicine one patient at a time.
That moment I connected that dot, that peace would come from sharing my own truth, sharing my own journey. That's when, the shift really happened for me.
The Modern Day Superhero Show.
Welcome everyone to the very first episode of the Modern Day Superhero Show. On today's show I have Dr. Michael Bauerschmidt, who is the president of the American College for Advancement in Medicine. This episode we're going to talk about what safety considerations to make when moving into a new home, the best water purification system for homes, how to identify and overcome chemical sensitivity, the best ways to combat indoor air pollution, the dangers of cooking with Teflon, safety considerations to make when eating seafood, identifying skewed results in scientific studies, how to effectively detoxify the cells in our body using oxygen therapy, really profound how to safely and effectively eliminate all of the toxins in your cells and in your body, and of course, helpful tips for finding purpose in life. Action-packed, really exciting episode, lots of great information. Let's get to it. Hey everyone, I'm sitting here with Dr. Michael Bauerschmidt at his beautiful home in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. It's going to take about a podcast episode to introduce him. He studied medicine at the Ohio State University. He has certifications by both the American Board of Family Practice as well as the American Board of Emergency Medicine. He practiced emergency medicine for 23 years and has been practicing functional integrative medicine for the past 7 years. He's president of the American College for Advancement in Medicine. He's chief medical officer of Low Country Mail in Mount Pleasant. His main passion is environmental medicine, and he's even certified in accumulation therapy. I could go on for about 6 more hours about all the certifications and experience he has, but to spare you that, I'll just tell you he loves to fish and dive. So thank you, Dr. Bauerschmidt. Sorry, Mike, for...
Please. Finally, after all these years, Alex, you finally called me Mike.
Someone who's been practicing medicine for 30 years, it's hard not to, call you doctor or come in the house and bow down and say, "Oh, sorry, that's all right." But anywho, thank you for inviting me here and for being on the show.
My pleasure.
So, just for those out there who don't know you extensively, like I guess I do now, can you tell everyone how you started to practice medicine, like how it all began, just a bit of that story, and how you came to start practicing functional medicine and
in
how
particular?
You got to, yeah.
Gosh, it started out when I was a child. No, I won't go back that far.
Yeah.
No, actually, I grew up in a Catholic family in Toledo, Ohio, and I always thought that I was going to be a priest.
Yeah.
And I even went to the seminary for a year before I figured out that celibacy thing was not was not in line with my goals in life.
Yeah.
And so I went back to college at the University of Toledo back home, and I got to be a junior, and my advisor called me up and said, "Mike, you got to pick a major."
Yeah.
And I went, "You mean I got to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life?" And he said, "Yeah, pretty much." It was probably one of the only rational decisions, one of the few rational decisions I made in my life, because I sat down and I really got to thinking about what I wanted out of life. And I wanted security for my family. I didn't want to have to worry about pleasing somebody else in terms of a boss. I wanted to be my own boss. And I wanted to be with people. And so I started, okay, let me run down the list. And I kind of went, businessman, well, no, I mean, you got to kind of screw the other guy to get ahead, so that's not really in it for me. Dentist, I went, how do you carry on a conversation with someone when you got your hands in their mouth?
Yeah.
Social worker, didn't pay anything. Teachers were a dime a dozen in the 1970s. And so I kind of went, what about a doctor? And I went and took the MCATs, and I scored really well. So I said, I guess I'm going to apply to medical school.
Yeah.
And I applied to all the schools in Ohio, and I got an invitation to interview at Ohio State. And I remember really clearly, they only had interviews twice a week. And when you came down there, you're usually with a group of about 24 people.
Yeah.
And they'd split you into 12 to start the interview and 12 to take a tour. And I was in the 12 to take a tour first, and the associate dean comes out and sits down and says, introduce your name and give me your name and where you're from, your major. And it goes around John Brown, biology, chemistry, microbiology, genetics. It gets around to me and I go, liberal studies. And everybody's kind of like, there's one we don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
The associate dean leaned forward. I was 2 to his right. He leaned forward and he looked me square in the eyes. He said, Mr. Bauerschmidt, was it? I went, yes, sir. And he said, let me personally welcome you to the Ohio State. In my mind, the liberal studies have been too long neglected in the pre-medical education. I had the acceptance 2 weeks later.
Wow.
The guys that were with me are still picking their teeth up off the floor, I think. It's just, It was just, they busted their ass in the sciences, and here I was, a liberal studies major, now going to medical school. So that's how I got here.
Yeah.
But that's not really how I got to be a functional medicine doctor. And I know this is about passion and mission
right.
in your life. And I've been in practice now. I was working in an emergency department in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it was a little quiet. It was rare, and one of the nurses tried to strike up a conversation and says, "Hey, Dr. B, what do you want out of life?" And I went, "That's an interesting question. Let me think about it for a second." I said, "Okay, I got it. I want to be internationally recognized, universally loved, and independently wealthy." And then I got a divorce and realized I was never going to be universally loved anymore. Yeah. But I did continue my career in emergency medicine and felt very happy. I was working half the month and making a lot of money and being able to take time to bike ride and travel and dive and fish, and it was a good life. And then I had a life-changing experience on the way home from work one morning. I was leaving a night shift from Bethesda Hospital up in Boynton Beach, Florida, and I had a rear-end collision on I-95. I was rear-ended by a plumbing truck because somebody was driving. Well, I won't say how they're driving, but this could be a family podcast. But let's just say they stopped at the bottom of the on-ramp. I hit my brakes, the truck behind me didn't. And I ended up blowing out 3 discs in my neck and 2 in my back. Yeah. So I was a card-carrying member of the Church of the Medical Orthodoxy. So I went to the neurologist, who sent me to the neurosurgeon, who sent me to the physiatrist, who sent me to the pain management guy. And I had my long and short-acting narcotics and my muscle relaxants and my anti-inflammatories and eventually my sleeping pills and antidepressants, and then a stuff called Provigil, which was kind of amphetamines that was legal because I was on all this other downer stuff, and I was getting nowhere. And they said, well, let's do a really low invasive, low risk surgery to fix the disc in your back. And I went, great, because we all know that surgery always succeeds when medicine fails. And they did it, and I felt great for about a week, and I was kind of half bent over the stove fixing something, and I sneezed. Yeah. And the pain started again. And I went, oh, God. And it got worse and worse and worse. I mean, it got to the point that I could not get out of a chair without somebody helping me up. Yeah. Wow. And they said, well, let's put you in the hospital. We'll give you some IV morphine and Ativan, which was really a bad experience. But they figured out that what had happened is that surgery had given me an infection in my disc and my bone. Wow. So then it was 6 weeks of a very high-potency antibiotic fed to me through a vein underneath my collarbone called the subclavian line. And when I was done, I was worse off than when I started. And it just so happens, I ran into a guy I used to work with in the ER, Mark Rosenberg. And he had started an anti-aging practice in Delray Beach, just up the road from Fort Lauderdale. And he said, Mike, let me give you some IV vitamin C. And I looked at him, and I said, Mark, I thought you were a doctor. And he looks back at me just without missing a beat, and he says, I am. What have you got to lose? Yeah. And so I started some IV therapy with vitamin C, and after the 3rd infusion, I walked out to the car to open my car door, and I went, oh my God, that doesn't hurt. And it was the first time in over 2 years I remembered what it was like not to be in constant pain. And I went, I got to learn more about this stuff. And that launched my study of functional medicine and getting the body what it needs. So far, we good?
Yeah.
Should I continue?
I mean,
I could continue. I could keep. You know me. It takes me 20 minutes to say hello.
no, that's whatever you'd like to say.
Okay. So I went home and I Googled IV vitamin C and found this place called the Reardon Clinic in Wichita, Kansas. And they'd been doing vitamin therapy for 30 years or so.
Yeah.
So I went out there to learn what they had to say, and I went, geez, I could do this. And I asked them, so well, where do you, what else do I need to know? I said, well, you need to learn chelation therapy.
Yeah.
I go, well, where do I learn that? He said, you go to this organization called ACAM. So I went home and I signed up for ACAM and started going to all their they had 2 conferences a year at the time. Now we're down to 1. A lot of competition out there.
Yeah.
But never missed a conference for the next, still haven't for the next 8 years.
Yeah.
And learned a lot about functional medicine. Once I'd figured out how to balance hormones and really how to help people, guide people with nutrition, I said, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet, and I mortgaged my boat, and I hung up my shingle in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and said, come see me. And it's just been that road ever since.
Yeah. And I hadn't mentioned this, but that's where I met you originally, and I remember just writing you a letter. I wrote to several doctors. I never told you that because I was interested in learning about functional medicine, integrative medicine. And within a few days, he called me, or Wendy called me, someone called me. I was like, oh, wow, you're literally right down the street. So yeah, it worked out perfectly. Thank you for that. I learned a lot in the few months I was.
Yeah. Well, after I started functional medicine, I gave up on the idea of being, internationally recognized, universally loved, and independently wealthy.
Yeah.
And decided that what I really wanted to do was to change the face of medicine one patient at a time. And that's really what this has given me the opportunity to do. And wherever I have the chance to educate someone about functional medicine, whether it's a student interested in just figuring out what it is it's all about, or someone who is, unfortunately for a lot of people, I'm the doctor of last resort.
Yeah.
They were like I was back when after the infection. Nobody knew what the heck to do with me other than give me more pills.
Yeah.
So thank God for Mark Rosenberg and and the Reardon Clinic and all the other folks that I've learned from over my years. And I'm always anxious to let other people know about this, and this is just another way of doing that.
Great.
So thank you for helping me fulfill my purpose.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'm aware that you just moved down here to South Carolina. It's beautiful. It was actually out in the water, coastal expeditions. I have to give that soundbite to Kevin, my friend who works over there. It's a great company. Went out sunrise kayaking tour, so that was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah,
anyway.
Tell me, I got to get his number. I'm still looking for things to do here.
I'll give it to you after this. But yeah, you moved into this new home, and I was wondering, it's obviously not. It looks like it's been here for some time. You didn't just build it yesterday.
No.
So, being someone who's so passionate about environmental medicine, what are the things you considered when you moved here, and what can you do about BOCs and all these acronyms that I don't even know what they mean anymore? So what do you do about that when you're moving into a home?
Well, speaking about moving into this home in particular, you're right, it's over 20 years old, but it had recently been redone by the previous owners.
Okay.
And what struck us is when we were walking through touring it, we noticed the paint cans in the garage, and they're all no VOC paints.
Oh, okay.
And there were hardwood floors throughout the first floor. There was carpeting on the second floor. Carpeting, and the first thing, carpeting is just a pollutant sponge.
Yeah.
So you do not want any carpeting, or worse, the carpet padding in your house, because that gives off all kinds of things like formaldehyde and holds the dust particles, which is what mold toxins and VOCs and semi-volatile VOCs and all the other air contaminants that are present in a home and also blow in from the outside. They attach to the dust. That's how they get around.
Wow.
So, you get rid of the carpet. So we've got hardwood floors throughout upstairs as well. That's one thing we did before we moved in. The other thing we did is, even though Charleston is actually rated 4th in the country in terms of water quality, I still am having unfortunately it hasn't been installed yet, we're waiting on the plumber. We're having a granulated activated charcoal filter for the entire house, and then a reverse osmosis for underneath the sink to get rid of the water pollution. And then we have a variety of air filters throughout the home. And I'm going to digress here a little bit.
That's fine.
because this is really kind of the crux of the matter for me. People that are listening may want to take out a pad and pencil, because this is going to be a little math. But if you consider for a moment, what are the sources of pollutants in our environment? I'm not talking about chemical companies, but how do the pollutants come in contact with us personally? And you figure, well, there's about 60 mLs, or a couple of tablespoons a day, in terms of hair products and lotions and toothpaste and stuff you rub on your skin or wash with. Probably 90 mLs for women, 45 mLs for guys. So figure 60 is kind of an average for everybody.
Yeah.
60 mLs isn't much. But then you figure, okay, if you took all the food you ate in a day and put it in the Cuisinart and blended it all up, you'd have a couple of liters of food a day.
Yeah.
So now you got 2,060 mLs. Everybody should probably be drinking about 2 liters of water a day. So water pollution and water, even if Charleston with the number 4 rated water in the country, there's a lot of things that aren't tested for.
Yeah.
I remember in residency we used to say, we ought to be putting Valium in the drinking water. Okay? Well, I got news for you folks. Valium is in your drinking water.
Wow. Yeah.
So is all the antidepressants and the beta blockers and the cardiac meds and everything else that your neighbors are taking are ending up in your water supply, because they are not filtered out by the traditional filtering methods and things. So that, plus the fact that in order to have water safely consumed because of bacteria and things, they put chlorine in the water. Or worse, chloramine.
Yeah.
Right? And when you take chlorine or chloramine and mix it with the organic products in the water, you create these things called trihalomethanes. So it's like dichlorobromomethane, dibromochloromethane, bromoform, and chloroform. And chloroform, if you recall, was an anesthetic agent that they used that was stopped being used because it was toxic to the liver.
Yeah.
Your liver is the number one thing you need to get rid of toxins in your body. So here you are, double duty on that one. So water filter, even though it's only 2 liters, 2 liters a day of a thing. Now comes the hard part, the air.
Yeah.
Can't stop breathing. Bad outcomes there all the time.
Yeah.
But you figure, depending on your activity level, you're pushing 12 to 16,000 liters a day of air in and out through your system. So now you're kind of up there in terms of, exposure. Air pollution is clearly the biggest problem.
Yeah.
I'll get back to the house in a minute.
All right.
Don't worry. So let's consider this for a minute. If you just had 1 part per million contamination, and that's all you were exposed to in the course of a day, 1 part per million, you would have already had the equivalent of about 300,000 times one of your thyroid hormone levels, just with 1 part per million of anything in your system. Because 1 part per million is actually 1 milligram per liter, which is, actually 1,000 micrograms per deciliter, and if you do the math out, you end up with 300,000 of the thyroid hormone level to 1 part per million.
Yeah.
Now, if you just had 1 part per million in everything you were exposed to, now you're at 16 parts per million, and that's 78 million times higher than some of your basic hormone levels.
Yeah.
So how does your liver get rid of all that in the course of a day? Eventually, it's not going to keep up.
Yeah.
And that's when you develop this stuff called chemical sensitivity. And the chemically sensitive patient are the folks that, they kind of avoid going into the candle store, forget about walking into Bed Bath & Beyond. They walk in there, or the new home smell or the new car smell gives them a headache or nausea. Those folks are really, really sick. They're really toxic, because what has happened is the VOCs is what they're bringing, volatile organic compounds. These are evanescent. These are anything with aromas or fragrances, like your Glade air fresheners and your plug-ins, loaded with these VOCs.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
They are hormone disruptors. big time.
Yeah.
They also can't be stored in the body like pesticides and herbicides and heavy metals will hang out in your liver and your kidney and your brain and other places.
Yeah.
So here's your liver. Imagine your liver is a factory, and it's there to churn out X amount of stuff a day. And you're already running 3 months behind in the production schedule.
Yeah.
Now here comes the supervisor, and he says, hey, I got this rush order. I need it tomorrow. What's the liver going to do? You know, the factory floor workers are going to go, yeah, and yours, buddy. You know, it's like not happening. And that's what gives you, and your body responds with headaches or nausea or vomiting or whatever it is that happens to get you. So we're back to the indoor air pollution, because, you know, the air quality is your biggest thing. You're indoors most of the day, between the office and the home. Very few people have the benefit of working outdoors all day long, unlike some people I know.
Yeah.
Some people sitting across the table from me.
Yeah. It's only a week at a time. It's pretty nice. Spring water and always being outdoors. It's national forest. Pretty nice. But go on.
There you go. See, well, that's the ideal job.
Yeah.
But so at any rate, so the indoor air pollution is really your biggest risk.
Yeah.
So what do you do about that? Well, you get some good air filters. And what's a good air filter? Well, it's a combination HEPA charcoal situation. You can throw in a ultraviolet light if you're worried about bacterial things or mold spores. Although UV light doesn't work that well on mold spores. Mold spores tend to be inactive until they're activated again, which is why mold is such. Dead mold is actually worse than live mold.
Really?
Yeah. So it's because you can't kill the dead stuff. It's already dead, but it still has all the antigenic activity to put your body into an immune frenzy.
Yeah.
So a good air filter is what you need. There's lots of them out there. IQ Air is probably the best known. It's a very slick Swedish model, and you can get all kinds of different filter systems for, you know, VOCs and semi-volatile VOCs, and for the chemically sensitive and everything else.
Yeah.
I have one from faustco.com. They make a perfectly good filter, just not as sleek and elegant looking as the IQ Air. AmeriCare Air is another good company out of Canada. Bottom line is need some good air filter system. You need to get rid of your carpeting. You need to get rid of the Glade air fresheners. You need to quit cooking with Teflon. Teflon is extraordinarily toxic.
What did you say about it before? Like if a canary was in.
If you put, and you heard a canary in a coal mine.
Yeah.
Well, if you take a canary and put them, you know, near your stove while you're cooking with Teflon, the canary is going to die.
Yeah.
The reason they use canaries is because their metabolism is so fast, a little bit of toxin affects them that much quicker than it does us. So what we don't notice the canary will die from, which is why they used them down to connect to detect the poisonous gases in the mines.
Yeah.
So go ahead and breathe the poison. Not for me. Get rid of the Teflon.
Yeah.
Okay. Laundry detergents, another fragrances. Anything that says fragrance in it is loaded with VOCs. Vinyl shower curtains, semi-volatile organic compounds. The older they are, the more toxic they are.
Wow. Yeah.
AstroTurf, you know, you got the AstroTurf mat on the inside of this, you know, clean your feet off, or you can get rid of it. The backing on that is usually old tires, so it's old petroleum products.
Yeah.
And for you soccer moms out there, if your kids are playing on AstroTurf, find them another field.
Yeah.
Just not good.
Yeah.
And then you get into your seafood, and I love seafood, but there's certain seafood I won't eat. Any Atlantic salmon is loaded with, and the only safe salmon to eat is Alaskan wild caught.
Yeah.
You're still going to have some mercury, but not as bad as you will with the farm raised stuff.
Yeah.
Any farm raised fish out, because what they do is they take the fish. The bait fish that are already full of mercury, but they chop all those up, and only those, and mix it with and that's their pellets, so they're force-fed mercury basically.
Wow.
Whereas the wild caught stuff, they may eat some of those same fish, but they're also eating crabs and other crustaceans and maybe some algae, and so their food source is varied.
Yeah.
So they're not as toxic. Very little in this world anymore that's not going to cause us some kind of problem. Our best shot is avoiding it.
Yeah.
So avoidance in the home, clean air filters, clean water, bioorganic as much as possible, and because don't even get me started on the GMOs. That'll be another 20 minutes. But,
Yeah.
all right, briefly on the GMOs. I gotta get this out of here too. Professor Seralini, a PhD in France, did a really interesting study, and he looked at 9 different. There were 3 fungicides, 3 herbicides, 3 pesticides. Mm-hmm. And he looked at them as the active ingredient alone and the active plus the inert ingredients.
Yeah.
Roundup was the classic. Roundup by itself, they say, oh, Roundup is safe. Glyphosate won't kill you.
Yeah.
And in the 1 to 2% solution they're talking about, it won't. It's not terribly toxic at that. And there was some press a while back about the guy, the vice president for Roundup in France, vice president of Roundup was offered. He said, "Oh, glyphosate is safe," the MC offered him a glass of Roundup, and said, "Well, go ahead and drink it." He says, "Are you crazy? That's Roundup."
Yeah.
Because when he did the test, the Roundup was safe, but when he mixed it with the so-called inert ingredients, 300,000 times more toxic.
Wow.
When they do the rat studies on this stuff, they don't look at rats for a period of 2 years, which is the normal lifespan of rats. They look at them for 3 months. Mm-hmm. And one of the studies, they said, well, see, they had this Roundup stuff, this Roundup chow, and then they had the regular chow, because they put extra Roundup in the chow with the rats. Yeah. And then they gave them regular chow. Well, the chow also had Roundup in it. And they said, well, there's no difference in the reproductive tumors in these 2 sample sizes. Well, of course not. They both got Roundup.
Yeah.
Just the other guy's got a whole lot more. Yeah. And they only looked at him for 3 months. They looked at him for two years. None of the mice that ate the Roundup made it 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's just, you really have to read the studies and just beware of anybody that says something is safe unless they have the study that says it is, unless you can see the study that was independently done. Never buy the study from the company.
Yeah.
That's like going to the used car dealer and it's like, hey, I checked it out myself, it's fine.
Right.
Drive that one down the block, see how far you get.
Yeah, it's great because in my research and just passionate about it, pretty much every medical doctor or someone who's insightful or researchers see how this even peer-reviewed journal articles can be overlooked like that, and that's what our safety standards are based on. So it's wonderful that you highlighted that.
Yeah.
Even though we're told it's safe, it's not necessarily safe. You have to actually look at, there's all these imperfections and confounding variables in these studies that they just kind of ignored for the sake of bringing a product out that can make a lot of money. Perhaps.
And even if the authors were independent and they seem to be independent and their conclusions, like there was a classic one on testosterone causing heart disease.
Yeah.
And the guys that did the study looked really good, except when you went through their numbers, they didn't do their numbers right. Yeah. They didn't. You look at their table with the numbers, and you look at the tables, the numbers and the conclusions, and they didn't match.
Yeah.
So sometimes people will interpret their own data to make a point. So it gets really, really confusing.
So how do we know what's safe and what's not safe when we can't even trust the peer-reviewed journal articles and? Peer-reviewed is safer. Yeah. But it depends on who peer-reviewed it. I mean, this is a classic thing. Again, going back to the Roundup thing in Dr. Seralini's work, there was an article published that debunked his theory. Mm-hmm. The 3 guys that wrote it were supposedly independent, but they had all received sponsorship from Monsanto. Right. So yeah. It's really, when you look at a study, you got to look at who funded it. Mm-hmm. You got to look at who ran it, and interpret the results with a grain of salt. I mean, if you got somebody because even medical schools, the drug companies come and say, hey, listen, I'm going to give you $600,000 to run this study on my new drug, or $2 million, or whatever the number is. Yeah. Drug companies aren't going to run the study. The dean of the medical school's got a business to run too. Yeah. And it depends on your patient selection, and so there's so many things that go into a properly controlled study, and but the important thing is who funded it, because there were 7 studies on the flu meds, and
only 3 of them were published,
Yeah.
and they were all in favor of the drug. The other 4 were against it, but somehow they never hit the press.
Yeah.
So all these things you got to look at it, because if you look at studies that are independently published, or that are independently run, independently published, with no financial overtones with them at all, 50% of those get published.
Yeah.
If you have a positive study sponsored by a drug company, 70% of those get published.
Yeah.
Something tells me something's not quite right there.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I wanted to ask you about, okay, so you talked about glyphosates. Is that how you say it?
Glyphosate, yeah.
Glyphosates. And these things that accumulate in our bodies. You talked about ways we can prevent that from happening in the future with air filters, water filters, taking carpet out of homes, things like that. What do we do when that stuff is in our body? How do we get glyphosates and all that out?
Interesting question. And this is what I've spent a great deal of time on, and this is really what I want to. My dream practice is yet to be realized. I'm getting closer. Getting closer.
Yeah.
But the big problem with getting toxins out of the body is getting them out of the cell. Mm-hmm. You can take all the extra supplements you want. You can do all the dietary cleanses you want. The problem is these toxicants cause. Everybody thinks that the blood is a continuous flow system. Mm-hmm. Heart to the aorta, to the arteries, to the arterioles, to the capillaries, to the venous side, back to the heart, and the whole cycle repeats itself.
Right.
It don't work that way.
Yeah.
There's this little sphincter at the end of the arteriole, just before it enters the capillary.
Yeah.
And it opens and closes to let the blood spurt into the capillary bed. Mm-hmm. And it may open and close every few seconds, every few minutes. The reason it's there is to give time for the oxygen and the nutrients that are in the blood to diffuse across the capillary membrane, get into the interstitial space, diffuse across into the cells, let the cells, use what they need, dump out what they don't need, so it gets back into the capillary bed on the other end, and then can get back to the heart, to the liver, to be, to be dumped.
Right.
Okay? The toxins will cause that arteriole, that little sphincter, to spasm. Hmm. So it's like closed.
Yeah.
And it opens only irregularly, if at all.
Yeah.
So the area where you have the highest concentration of toxins is the area that's also being robbed of its ability to get the nutrients and oxygen it needs to get rid of them. Yeah. So you can take all that stuff you want. The train is bypassing the station. They rerouted the highway, and you are no longer on the transit list.
Yeah.
And so what you really need to do is to reverse that arteriolar spasm. There's a few ways you can do it. Hyperbarics can do it. Mm-hmm. Breathing oxygen can do it. Exercise with oxygen therapy can do it. I like this thing called the live O2 system because it's altitude contrast.
Okay.
And when you do this altitude contrast, this is a work by Dr. von Arden out of Germany. And he demonstrated that, a couple of things. Number one, I got to digress here again for a minute.
That's fine.
As we get older, our bodies lose the ability to exchange oxygen between the lungs and the pulmonary vasculature, to the point that we'll drop a percentage point on our oxygen saturation every few years. It's considered to be 1 to 2 points every decade after age 30. Well, the first thing he showed was that just after one treatment using the altitude contrast, he could reverse that and turn the clock back on people 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
Okay. Then he went on in a separate study to show that the arteriolar spasm, that can be reset.
Yeah.
That can be reset in as few as 15 treatments. Yeah. And that effect can last 2 years or longer, if not permanently.
With 15 treatments?
With 15 treatments, around that, depending on where you're at.
Yeah. I
have had amazing, and the difference is the altitude contrast. 15 minutes with the altitude contrast, and by that I mean you're just getting your heart rate up to 170 minus your age. Okay. So a guy like me, I don't have to get it up very high. But you get it up there, and then you just and you're breathing 100% oxygen at this point.
Okay.
Because of how it's set up, when you just the flip of a switch, and it changes the oxygen source to the equivalent of 12 to 15,000 feet of altitude.
Yeah.
And just hold that there for 15 to 30 seconds. You switch back to oxygen, and that's enough to make that sphincter spasm let go.
Wow.
Because of the low oxygen concentrations delivered. You might notice being a little short of breath, but what your arteries are doing is like they're opening wide open. It's just your nitric oxide levels go through the roof and cause all this tremendous vasodilatation. And that's what resets this thing. So 15 minutes with the Live O2 is equal to 5 hours in a hyperbaric chamber, is equal to 6 hours with exercise with oxygen therapy, and is equal to 36 hours just sitting around breathing oxygen through a mask.
Wow. That's incredible.
So it's incredible. So that's how you get the stuff out of there.
Yeah.
Then you've got the issue of, okay, now some of this stuff, like the semi-volatile organic compounds and the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are basically your car and diesel exhaust, those particles are too big to get into the venous side of the capillary bed. They have to get picked up by the lymphatics.
Yeah.
So your lymphatics can get plugged up pretty easily, which is why I do the Live O2 for 15 minutes and people 20 minutes on a thing called a Juvent, which is a micro-impact platform. This is different than a jiggle plate.
Okay.
Totally different.
Yeah.
This is the only machine out there that will keep you at no more than 0.3 Gs in terms of force and between 32 and 37 hertz. And all the studies in terms of osteoporosis and lymphatic drainage and everything else have all been done within this very narrow parameter.
Okay.
It will keep you there for 20 minutes. It will get rid of it will move those toxicants out. Then you have all your supplements and your nutrients. And you know, the ideal world is then you go sit in a infrared sauna for 30 to 60 minutes and go have your green drink or whatever your favorite supplement package is. I have my own, but it's like, and really, if you really want to get rid of the toxins you've accumulated over your lifetime, this is the way to do it.
Wow. And it brings up a point in my mind. I know, well, first I'll say I used to shadow you, and sometimes people come in, they couldn't necessarily afford these things, and we kind of talked about it earlier. What do those folks do? Is there any way, or they just kind of have to figure something out?
Well, you know, it's interesting because, you know, in the practice in Lauderdale, it was a cash-based practice. I couldn't spend an hour with you and take the $12 to $20 insurance company was going to pay me for, you know, that was a 2,000 square foot office and 5 employees and and my own mortgage to worry about. But Wendy actually noticed it. My wife noticed it sooner than me because I'm a softie. You know, I said, you can't afford it. Well, we'll, you know, try to figure something out here. And but she said, you know, life is all about choices. And people would come in with their, you know, with their Gucci bag and complain about the cost of the office visit. And she just kind of go, you know, it's all about choices. You know?
Fair enough.
But there are, and I admit there are people that just can't afford it. And avoidance is the best thing in the world, and good nutrition is the second. But in terms of reversing that arteriolar spasm, the only 4 things I know of that will do it are what I mentioned: the Live O2, exercise with oxygen therapy, hyperbarics, or just breathing oxygen. Just don't have any other. I mean, you can help minimize. You can slow your progression, and you can get rid of some of the stuff. But the really deep down in there for a long time, it's tough to get rid of. And until you start doing that, it's a hard thing to do. But you know, the Live O2, and if you just did the Live O2, the Juvent, and the sauna, you'd have about a $10,000 investment totally. But you would be set for the rest of your life. It's kind of, you know, it's like, well, you know, if I can figure a way to, you know, and a couple of these companies will work with, I know Live O2 and Juvent, if you got any kind of credit rating, they'll say you put just some amount down, and then you can put payments out over 1 to 2 years at you know, no interest. So it's not, they're not impossible to get. It's just, I wish there was an answer for everybody, but avoidance is the premier thing. You know, start with the water filters, get the air filter, you know, eat clean food, and see how you feel. If you're still feeling bad after that, then you really have to consider spending more money. Wish there was another way around it. It's just that, or elect somebody to Congress that was willing to do something about the environment.
Yeah. If you don't mind, Mike, so hard for me to do that. I'd like to switch gears here and ask you a personal question, if that's all right.
Go right ahead.
So you're obviously someone who's really passionate about what they do. You have a strong purpose. I know the first challenge is getting in that accident, and you talked about how you overcame that. And it seems like no matter what obstacles thrown in front of you, I don't know if you mentioned this. I don't know if you want me to mention this, but you've moved quite a bit, recently.
Yeah.
You moved, you're in Kansas, you're in California, you're in Charleston. You came from Florida. You went to school in Ohio. You've been everywhere, and those were for. We don't have to really talk about the details of it, but you've had to move. What keeps you from saying, oh, maybe I'll just. That's okay. That there's mold here, and that's I'll be all right. Or what keeps you motivated to not ever give in to or not ever compromise and say, I got to continue to follow what I believe in and keep learning. So where does that drive come from?
That's a real interesting question. And I think it goes back to when I had the accident. Well, actually, it goes back to I was actually 17 years old, and I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis.
Yeah.
And at the time, there wasn't much anybody could do about it other than use steroids and a drug called asulfidine, which is basically an antibiotic.
Yeah.
And I was one of the lucky few, or unlucky few, that had what they call a fulminant episode. I was diagnosed in December, and in July I was in the hospital fighting for my life.
Wow.
And the doctors were telling my parents that if I don't have surgery, I was going to die. And but I had to agree to it. And I just could not imagine having a disfiguring surgery where they'd take out my colon and I'd have to wear a pouch. 17 years old and 1971, that just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And there's a fellow down the street that came, and he had Crohn's disease, similar kind of disease,
right.
And he had to have a colectomy. And he showed me that there really was life after that. And I agreed to the surgery, finally.
Yeah.
After the odds are now 65 to 35 against me surviving.
Yeah.
I was a hot mess. I got out of the hospital. I was 98 pounds and soaking wet, and I was one big pimple from all the steroids, and it looked like a death camp survivor.
Yeah.
But got through that, and kind of just said, okay, life is there's a reason I'm here. And then after the accident, I always thought I would get carried out of the ER one day in a box.
Yeah.
And I had the accident and knew I couldn't go back to the ER, and I really lacked purpose. I could not. I was really lost for a while, and the drugs didn't help.
Right.
And my wife, being a very wise woman, one day just kind of got fed up and said, here are 3 names, call one of them. And they're names of 3 life coaches. Mm-hmm. And I went to see this happened to be a physician, internal medicine doctor that had transitioned over into thing to help other doctors recreate their lives. And I went to see her, and I ended up getting certified as a life coach. And
sorry, I didn't mention that one.
Yeah, that's all right. That's certified as a life coach, and then I did a leadership program with Coaches Training Institute, and it was a phenomenal experience. It was a 10-month program. Actually, you might like this. It was a 10-month program. You don't have to be a coach to take it, but it was really an eye-opener in terms of learning some very valuable lessons in life, and how to. And from that, I was able to recreate a purpose, and that was to change medicine one patient at a time.
Yeah.
And so I've always held to that core value. Now, you mentioned my moves. Well, I moved from Fort Lauderdale, sold the practice there to create an environmental medicine practice, in Kansas, where there was already an established practice, and they were looking for more physicians, and they were very experienced in nutritional therapy, but not necessarily in environmental.
Yeah.
And I got there and thinking this was going to be the best job of my life.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the circumstances were such that they had a mold issue, and I got sick from the mold,
Yeah.
and I could not continue to work there.
Yeah.
Because the type of mold they had was not the type you could remediate.
Right.
But anyway, so I ended up in California, where they had a compounding pharmacy who would, and the owner's wife was a environmental scientist.
Mm-hmm.
As a PhD, she understood all the dangers, but she could not do anything about them.
Right.
So I thought this will be a great partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And we go out there, and a couple of months later, unfortunately, she passes away from ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, the patient flow dried up rather instantaneously, and here I am. And so I get a call from a recruiter one day that mentions this rather entrepreneurial fella in Charleston, South Carolina, that's looking for a functional medicine doc with a little gray in the temples. Thank God they didn't mention hair on top of the head. Probably would have lost that job.
Yeah.
But so while we're focused on hormone development and building, and fixing hormones, particularly for men, but we're going to do men and women, and also have an IV nutritional center.
Yeah.
So many of our hormone problems stem from environmental illness.
Yeah.
So whereas in California I was left with trying to explain environmental medicine and why it was important to people,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to come to me with a specific problem that's environmentally related.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix that problem and also teach them about environmental medicine.
Yeah.
So it's really, I still get to do what I feel called to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just the circumstances are different. So how do I keep going? I still want to change medicine one patient at a time. I still would love to be internationally recognized and independently wealthy. And, you get to be, to me, 60 is middle-aged.
Yeah.
So you get to be middle-aged. And you start to think, the alternative isn't all that appealing.
Yeah.
I keep going because I had the opportunity to sit on my butt and not live my purpose, and it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
So, for folks out there that seem to be stuck and seem to have hit that wall, I would just invite them to recreate themselves and develop a purpose. And there's lots of people out there that could help. You can teach them meditation.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, actually, it's a great place to start, just to quiet the mind and let the dream present itself.
Yeah.
The other ways is to hire a life coach and see what it is that's out there for you. And others just to sit back and say, what really makes me happy?
Mm-hmm.
And build your life around that happiness. Here I am sitting in a beautiful home in a wonderful neighborhood with a spring-fed lake, and and the ocean is 5 miles down the road.
Yeah.
Beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah.
Never thought it could have happened. So, in a way, I am independently wealthy.
Yeah.
Even though I don't have the money in the bank. So, you just get up every morning with that, being true to what it is to your purpose. Find that purpose and be true to it, and life will take you where it needs to go. And that's where I've developed the 2 rules in life. The other thing that keeps me going, 2 rules in life. Number 1, abandon all hope of having a better past.
Yeah.
Can't fix it, can't do anything about it. Don't go back and say, well, only if I would have done this back then.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because there's no guarantee that doing something different 10 years ago would have resulted in anything better now. And chances are just as good it would have been worse.
Yeah.
So let it go. And the second thing is, everything always works out perfectly. Just not how you expect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So just let life happen.
Yeah.
Other people call it living in the present.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for answering that. It was a wonderful answer. I think it'll help a lot of people. And the whole podcast, just the information you have is profound, and we scratch the surface of what you actually know. Because, obviously it would be probably a 30-day podcast straight through if we sat and talked about everything you knew. But for the sake of the podcast, keep it, reasonable time so people can listen to it. Going to wrap up here, and I just want to ask you, where can people get in touch with you? What are you working on? Because I know you have the clinics going, but I don't know. You said it was
we haven't actually opened yet. We had kind of a soft opening. We're not going to be open for start the advertising program till November.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. So the boss really wants everything in place before we open, which I admire. But www.lowcountrymail.com is the website. You can contact me there through info@lowcountrymail.com. That is probably the best way to get in touch with me. I hesitate to give out my personal email.
That's fine. It's no, I'm just kidding. I'll put it in later. I understand.
And if you'd really like to learn more about functional medicine or find a practitioner like me near you, go to www.acam.org. That's acam.org. And on there you'll find a physician link. And click on that, put in your zip code and a mileage range, and any practitioners that think like me will pop up on your screen.
Thank you so much. If you're up for it, I'll have you on another time.
Sure.
In the future.
Like I said, it's part of my purpose in life to educate people. So change the world one patient at a time, one person at a time.
Well, thank you for bringing me into your home, beautiful Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. It's a great place. Thank you.
Let's go grab our fishing poles.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Modern Day Superhero Show. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever else you may be listening to the show. If you've got a second, please leave a quick review on iTunes. If you think someone else you know may benefit from the show, please take a second to share it with them. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at MDSuperhero and Facebook at Modern Day Superhero 1. Better yet, you can enter your best email at moderndaysuperhero.com or text keyword superhero to 38470 and I'll send you my free newsletter. On the site, you can download all other podcast episodes I've created along with corresponding transcripts, and you can check out my blog and vlog there as well. Did you know that you can directly support the production costs of this show for as little as $1 a month? Not only that, direct sponsors are entitled to awesome additional benefits, such as ad-free shows, access to shows before they're released on iTunes, additional content, including blooper reels, and much more. For more information, check out moderndaysuperhero.com/crowdsponsor. Thank you again for listening to the show, and I hope you have a wonderful day.